Hello, welcome to another Digital Photo Mentor live photo editing session here on my channel. I'm Darlene and I am your host today. I'm going to be editing subscriber submitted images today and demonstrating Lightroom and probably some Luminar Neo as well. So I've got my course information available for you today because we recently released a complete course on Luminar Neo, as you can see over here, and it is now available for purchase. And there are lessons being posted basically daily. I'm recording them as we speak. So to show you what it looks like, Rob's going to put, oops, apparently I have to get out of this. There we go. Rob's going to put a link to it in the chat for you, but the course is now available for purchase. We originally thought it was going to be about 9 hours, and I've already totaled up to about 28 or 29 lessons that I have planned, and 11 are already recorded. So basically, I'm building this course as you go through it, and there's going to be a series of live sessions just like this, but on Zoom, and you'll be able to attend and submit your questions and ask them live. So I've set that up to show you sort of what it looks like inside the course. We're starting the live sessions on March 16th, and they'll be every Monday and Wednesday. And you can see that there are already several lessons available. And if you are not sure if this course is for you, you can actually watch the introduction and lesson 1 for free. So check that out. Rob will put a link for you in the chat on both of those things, on how to purchase it. It is still on pre-order price, which is $59. So I don't want to spend too much time on that. I just wanted to show it to you and let you know that it is available. So let me just get over to Lightroom and we'll get started. All right, let's see who is here. We got lots of regulars as usual. Welcome, Sheila. Great to have you back. Snowy here too, Deb. We had several inches over the last week. Bjorn, welcome. We have snow here as well, and I saw you had submitted some snow images. You may see your images on the screen. I'm going to work on at least one of those today. Nigel, what time is it in the Caribbean, Nigel? I'm sure that it's much warmer and sunnier there. Vicky, also from Edmonton. I believe that's the same Vicky. Marguerite, Ontario. And that's AJ, right? Cremos is AJ, I believe. Chicago. Hey, I love Chicago. Great city. So we've got lots of regulars. I'm going to get started on editing. So I know that some people are using Luminar and some people are using Lightroom. So I try and do a combination of both to make sure that everybody gets benefit. And even if you are not using Luminar and I'm demonstrating it, just have a watch and see what it can do because I use Luminar as a plugin for Lightroom. So it may be something that you decide that you want to add to your workflow. For example, Vic submitted this image of the sunset, and Vic said that he's using an older version of Lightroom, like Lightroom 6, for example, and Luminar, whether it be Luminar AI or Luminar Neo, the new one, would make a great addition to your workflow if this is your situation as well, because you can have the best of both worlds. You've got Lightroom where you can catalog and keep all your photos in your base, and you don't have to change anything, but then you still get the benefit of new software and new technology by adding Luminar as a plugin. Nigel says it's 6 minutes after 4 and blazing hot. Well, good for you. And not so much here. It's actually not too bad for winter in Edmonton. I think it's -3 or something. Okay, so we're going to get started on this one, taken with a Fuji. And let's just have a look at what we got going on. So good exposure. Just to recap a few things I've talked about. You'll hear me if you're regulars. Most of you are talk about the same things all the time. We're looking at the histogram. Okay, so we don't have any clipping on the right-hand side, which is good. He's got nice detail in the sky. Often when you're doing a sunset, if you could share the sunset tips article, please, Rob. Often when you're doing a sunset, if it's overexposed, and let's say we exposed for the boat, and you end up with a sunset back at the computer that looks like this, okay? Because your camera wants to average the scene, and it usually comes up with something like this. So this exposure is actually perfect because he's got a good balance of the sky exposed properly and nice color without going too far off the bottom end. There's actually nothing. If I turn on the clipping warning, see that? There's nothing clipping here. So it's actually a perfect exposure, and we can work with this. So there's a couple of different ways you could go with this kind of image. We could make it more silhouette and leave this guy totally silhouetted. But I'm going to start by cropping it, actually. I'm going to leave it in the original aspect ratio, but I want to make this guy a little bit more center. And I want to get rid of some of this stuff on the right because I really feel like he is the focus, and I want to make him a little bigger and get rid of this buoy thing over on the right here. So I want to focus on him and the reflection and the nice sky. Okay, so you can see he's still sort of in that third, but now the boat is as well. And that just brings him in a little closer. Actually, maybe not quite so much, just so we get rid of that buoy. Like so. Okay. Next, I'm going to go and change the camera profile. Okay. I've looked at various different ones here already. If you hover over the camera profiles, okay, this one gives less contrast. I ended up going with Astia, okay, because it gave me nice color and a little bit lower contrast than the original one that was shot, which was Provia. Okay, now I'm going to do my usual, okay, and I think what's going to happen if I do shift double click, okay, nothing much happened because it's already touching the edges of the graph. So I'm going to use Alt Option key and click on the slider, okay, so that shows me what's clipping. Okay, there we go. So see how I can just bring that up a little, and it's going to brighten everything. And if I go too far, it's going to lose all that detail in the sky. So I don't want to go too far. I do want to have a little bit of black clipping. And then I'm going to head to masking right away because I want to affect the sky and the water and the man in the boat separately, right? So let's do mask. And I'm going to do sky first. Let the program select the sky. It did a good job. You can see where it's green, right? Keep in mind that this box can float. So if you want to see the whole sky, just grab it from this top bar here and move it. Okay. So I want to lower the exposure even more. And what I'm going to do is actually dehaze. Okay, so look what happens when I do dehaze. We really get some punch in that sky. And I might go a little bit of white just to keep it a little bit brighter. But look at the difference with the contrast and color that pulls out. Okay, so anytime you add dehaze or black to your image, you're going to bring out more color. Okay, I'm going to put this back up here because I'm going to do another select. This time I want to get the water. Okay, so how can I do the water the best? If I do a linear gradient and pull it up from the bottom, I'm going to get the man in the boat. So I'm going to try luminance range and just drag a little box over the water. And as expected, I got a lot of the sky because it's a similar tone, which is fine because we knew that the sky was selected well on the first mask. So I'm just going to subtract it from this one. Okay, subtract sky. Now you can see the selection is really nice over the water. Okay, I'm actually going to expand this because I'm missing a bit of the water here. So I want to make sure I get the whole thing. So I'm going to expand this a little bit. There we go. So see what I'm looking for is I'm making sure I get this corner and this corner. There we go. Okay. So literally I have almost the whole range of tones. Okay, except the very dark, which leaves out the boater. Now I'm going to do the same thing that I did to sky. I'm going to bring the exposure down a little bit and dehaze. So watch what happens, right? Look at that. It's adding a natural vignette to the bottom of the image. So I don't even have to do another one and do a vignette, but it's darkening the ripples and bringing them out on the water. How cool is that? I'm going to do a little bit of white just to keep that contrast in the water. Okay. All right, let's do a before and after. I'm just hitting the backslash key. So that's the original image. And that's where we're at now. So we've really punched up the contrast and the color. Okay, let's close the mask. I'm going to increase the exposure a little bit. Now remember, exposure is midtones. Okay, look at the part of the histogram that's highlighted when I put my mouse over exposure. It's the midtones. So it's really affecting the boat. Okay, it's pushing everything up and down, but it's affecting the midtones more. Okay, so I want to do that, but I only want to do it on the guy in the boat. So back to mask, select subject. Right? Now, if you are using an older version of Lightroom like Vic is, you are not going to see these masking tools. You would have to do this masking manually or select the sky and paint it in with a graduated filter or the paintbrush. Okay, so the benefit of these newer masking tools is that it does it for you automatically. So I'm going to give it a little bit of exposure, a little bit of white. So see what's happening on the boat. It's picking up the highlights there on the buoy. Wait, see what's happening? It's got a little bit of highlight around it. I could actually do a minus on this one and minus or subtract the light areas. In fact, I'm going to turn this up high so I can see it. I do this a lot. So I go over the top with my edits just to be able to see what I'm doing. Okay, so I'm going to zoom in here and I'm going to pick this luminance range down here. Okay, so I'm selecting or minusing that. So I'm trying to get these halos to disappear. Oh, look at that. We're getting closer. Okay, see that? I'm getting the halos to disappear. Oh, now I've got nothing selected. So I've gotten a little too far, I think. Let's try shifting that. Not working as well as I had hoped. So I'm going to delete this one. There we are. Delete. Okay, so now I'm back to the man. I think I'm just going to have to live with it and just not go as far so I don't get these things showing up around him. Okay. So kind of subtle here, maybe a little bit of shadows. That works good. Let's see what's actually selected. Okay. Let's turn the mask off again. So before and after, I am going to bring the overall exposure up a tiny bit. And then after doing so, see how that's affecting the boat and the man, I could go back to my mask, okay, and edit the sky again, make it a little bit darker. Go back to the one I did on the water, make it a little darker. And I could rename these as well. Okay, so if I forget what I've done here, I can call this one water. And I can call this one sky. And this one, I'm just clicking the little 3 dots, man and boat. So that's a pretty good edit, right? Now I could also do things like increase the overall clarity of the image, which helps again. Look at that, okay? And go down to the HSL panel and adjust the colors here. So I could use the targeted tool, click on this, and then when I hover over the image, wherever I hover and click, any color that is matching where my mouse is going to be affected when I click and drag. Okay, so I can really intensify the yellows and oranges by darkening. Okay, don't go too far. I want to make sure it's still subtle. Let's maybe darken a little more down here. Okay, that's in the blue. See how much more contrast we're bringing out just by adjusting these colors. That looks nice and punchy. Holly made it. Hi, Holly. Okay, let's see if there's any questions about this one. Stephanie from Oregon, welcome again. Okay, great question. Do I suggest ETTRs? And thank you for posting what that stands for. Exposed to the right. So what that means is to make your exposure as high as possible without clipping. To a point, yes. So my answer to that would be yes, but it depends, right? In this case, I wouldn't actually want to shift it higher, okay? Because if I go back, I'm just going to make a duplicate here. Okay, if I go back to the original image, there is room for him to expose to the right here. So if he had exposed more to the right, like that, we have a lot more editing to do. Okay, so that's why I said the exposure that was done was absolutely correct for this scene. Okay, you'll notice that I barely touched exposure in the finished version. Okay, I pushed it up a tiny little bit just to affect the man in the boat. So I would say, yes, I agree with exposed to the right, but dependent on the subject. Okay? I hope that answers your question. It's a little bit vague. I apologize. Welcome from Australia, Lynette. Oh, yay. Born is here. Okay, great. Maine, welcome. Sabago Lake. Welcome. We've got a few new people here, so that's wonderful. All right, so that is the before and after on this one. Let's take a look at another image. Since Bjorn is here, I want to look at his images. And I do believe I've got on your form here, let's see. What are you using for processing? Lightroom Classic. Okay, perfect. And using Topaz, Lightroom, and Luminar AI. Okay, perfect. All right, so I have an idea with this one because there's some neat sort of sun flare happening, and a couple things that I want to enhance. Okay, so let's take this one into develop here in Lightroom first. And I can see that he's using an Olympus camera, raw file. So that's great. Okay. So the backlight here is wonderful for bringing out that sparkliness in the snow. Okay. Remember we talked about this in a previous week. If you were on that one where we looked at one of Rita's images and the snow didn't have the same sparkle. Okay. So the light really makes a difference here. I'm just going to go full screen on this one. Welcome from Bulgaria. Okay, so on the snow, the first thing I want to do actually is crop this one, and then I'm going to adjust the camera profile. Okay, with the crop, I first want to just make sure that the horizon is straight. Okay, so I just clicked auto, and it's straightened based on this line. I'm going to reset it and do it with the ruler just to show you how it's done. So you click this little ruler here and the crosshairs. Can you see this little sort of crosshairs thing? It's the X that I'm looking at, not the ruler. So it's like a T. I want to put it so that the horizontal bit is on the horizon. Click and hold. And then I'm going to put the other bit. You can even go off the image, but keep it right along the line of the horizon. And then when I let go, it straightens based on that, okay? Now I'm going to unlock this aspect ratio because I want to keep it sort of almost panoramic, and I'm going to go free form with my crop. So I want to get rid of all this foreground. Okay, so notice that the subject, which is these little tufts of grass here, is right in the middle, okay? And the horizon is up here sort of on the third, but I want to get rid of this bottom part, okay? Not so much. The snow with the crispy and the sparkle is great, but we don't need a third of the image of it, okay? So I'm going to come up from there. When you have a lot of foreground like that, I want to show you the difference, okay? So it feels like the image is really far away or the subject is really far away when you have so much foreground. Can you see the difference? Right? If I go back here and reset it, and can you see the difference between these two? You see how the one on the right feels like the subject, you have to walk farther into the picture to get to it, right? So that's why I'm cropping that one in from the bottom. I'm going to crop in a little bit from the left as well. There's this sort of, I'm not even sure what that is over there. I'll want like a white stick or something, but I'm just going to get rid of it. I could clone it out, but honestly, I'll just get rid of it. Now these grasses are kind of leaning that way off to the left. So I want to leave them a little more space to the left. So I'm going to come in even further on this side. Okay, so I'm getting closer to something like that. Okay. And I might even come down a little bit from the top because again, the sky is fairly bright and it's not really the subject matter. Okay. We want to draw attention to these little grasses. Okay? Another trick I'm going to do is to actually flip it. I've talked about this before with portraits and with people images where if something is facing, I got to come on the camera so I can move my hands here and I got to think about which way I'm going here. So if something is facing a particular direction, like if I'm facing this way, you want more space in front of me, okay, versus behind, okay? So I don't want to be here, okay? So with these grass, okay, they're leaning this way and we also in our society read from left to right. Oh, hey, this is your image. No, this is Bjorn's. I have one of yours as well, Vic. So I'm going to take this image and actually flip it horizontally, right? Because we read from left to right, right? Our inclination is to follow that way, and now it feels like the grasses are going forward. Okay. Let's dig into camera profile here. So neutral, we can go muted, portrait, or vivid. Okay, so vivid actually adds some contrast, which I'm going to do anyways. So let's start with that one. Right. If I hit the J key, you can definitely see that there's a spike over here on the right, and it's overexposed that bit of the sky. But I think overall the actual exposure looks pretty good. So I'm going to leave that overexposed. We can play with the color a little bit with the white balance. We can try the eyedropper and click on the snow. Okay, so the eyedropper is going to neutralize any color that I click on. Okay, so if there's a hint of color in the snow, it's going to neutralize it. Okay, see what that did? It was a little bit sort of almost pink or magenta. But if I click in a different spot, I might get a different color. Okay, now it's a bluer. Right? If I click over here, I'm going to get a different color again. Right? Now that's kind of cool because it's actually enhanced the sky. The whole thing is a lot warmer and it's got rid of that pink. Okay, let's take a look at the difference it made here. Okay, so the temperature is 54.50 and -4 in the tint. I'm going to go back to what it was shot at. Okay, so definitely warmed up. Can you see that? And I did that just by clicking in one of these shadow areas. So I like what that's doing. Right, now I'm going to check the whites. Right, Alt Option. Okay, so definitely the sky is clipping, but I'm not going to worry about that for now. And I want to have a little more black. Right, see what that does in terms of contrast. And I'm going to do dehaze, which is going to do that even more. Now I will increase the exposure just a tiny bit, okay? Because I'm looking at this area, not up here, okay? Because we're going to work on the sky separately like we did the boat. So this is a very similar image, backlit, almost a silhouette, right? So now let's do select sky. Okay. Now it didn't select these sort of sun flares down here, and I'm not super concerned about it right now, but let's see how this goes. Okay, so I'm going to hit the J key. Okay, you don't get the same option when you click Alt Option in the adjustments for masking. So you can turn it on, the clipping warning, by the J key. And I'm just going to bring highlights down until it's not clipping anymore. And now you can see that spike is not touching the right. Okay, see that? And look how much color we now have in the sky just by darkening it. Okay. I'm not going to go any further than that because I think it's going to start to look overdone. Maybe highlights a tiny bit more. Close the mask, and now I can actually go back to the white slider and drag it up a little bit. So it's going to affect the snow and everything, okay? Even a little bit of exposure. So let's take a look at the before. Oops, turn the clipping warnings off. Before. Okay, I want no clipping warnings. Come on, what's it doing? Before. Okay, I don't know why it's giving me a clipping warning there. And after. Okay, so lots more contrast and color. Let's add a slight edge vignette. Okay, I'm going to use my edge darken medium from my Lightroom presets. You can take a look at my Lightroom presets if you want to add them to your repertoire. Rob will provide a link for you. And I'm going to scale the blacks back just a little bit. Okay. Right, so we've got nice contrast. Next, I'm going to play with this image in Luminar, because what I want to do here is actually play around with this idea of these bokeh, okay? We could crop it even more if we want to go farther here. Let's try something like that. Let's see what that looks like. No, I was happier with it before. I'm just undoing. So Command or Control Z or Z, okay? So let's open this one in Luminar. Right click, edit in, and I'm going to use Neo, okay? But if you have Luminar AI, this will work as well, okay? It'll also work if you have Luminar 4, because you just need something that can apply a texture or an overlay. Sorry, what did you mean? Okay, I've got a question here. Thank you so much for your hard work. You're most welcome. The way you teach us is very simple and easy. By chance, do you have any plan to make one video? Do you mean a video series? On which program? Tell me which program you're looking to learn. We have a series currently on Photoshop. I've done 2 classes on Photoshop, Photoshop 101 and 201. If you could share a link for those, Rob. And also the Luminar Neo class that I talked about actually at the beginning of the live, and maybe you missed it because I started talking about that right at the beginning. So Rob will share the link in the chat for you. Okay, so Rob is my husband slash webmaster and IT guy, and he is here in the chat to help you out. Okay. Okay, so the image is opened in Luminar Neo. Oops, trying to move it over. There we go. Let me make it fit the screen. And what I want to do here is actually add more bokeh. But I'm gonna add some of my favorite filter. Holly knows what that is. That's my mystical. Okay, so look what that does. It gives this dreamy sort of effect, which works really great on this image. Okay, so it also helps to kind of minimize this glare up top here. Now, if I want the glow to happen, okay, but I don't want it so much on the snow. So I'm going to turn up a little bit more and then mask it. So this is one of the benefits of the tools inside of Luminar, is that you can say, well, I just want it on part of the image. I'm going to keep the snow and the little grasses a bit sharper. Okay, so it keeps that sparkle. Now see what this tool is doing. So it's mostly applying now on the edges of the image and up here. Okay, so I masked it, so it's only applying where you see the red. Okay, I can actually just make a smaller brush. do a little bit in the foreground down here as well. Okay, now I want to do what I came for, which is the bokeh. If you are using Luminar AI, you're going to go to the texture overlay tool because there's no layers. If you're using Luminar 4 or Neo, you're going to add a layer. Okay, now I've already added a couple of my bokeh images here. Okay, you can add custom ones of your own. I'm going to try this yellow one here because I'm going to add it as a layer, right? And play around with it. Let's just see what we get. Might not be the right one. I might have another yellow one that works better. Right out of the box, what happens is you get this layer at 50% opacity. Okay, so it's like you have, if you're not familiar with using layers, I'll just use a demonstration here with a piece of paper. Okay, so if you have a one layer, which is your original image, okay, so say my face is the original image, and you put a new layer on top with opacity 100, that's what you get. You don't see me, okay? Now I'm out of focus. Okay, but if I cut a hole in this paper, okay, now that's the mask. If the paper is less opaque or transparent, like an onion skin, you can see through it, okay? So those are all things that you can do with layers, and that's what I'm going to do on this one next, okay? So I'm going to put it back to the 50% opacity. I can also change the blend mode, okay? So the blend mode has to do with how this layer works or reacts with the one below it. So if I change it to lighten, it's looking for anything in the new top layer that's lighter than the bottom layer, okay? So now you can see that the bokeh is showing up in places where it's darker, okay? Any of these lighten and screen will do the same similar thing. If you go down into overlay and soft light, it adds a bit of contrast while looking for things that are brighter, okay? I find that overlay and soft light work really well for texture kind of images, but look what it's done here, okay? It's actually created something kind of cool, and it's made this really sort of dark and moody image. Let me just play with the actual bokeh a little bit. I'm not sure that this is the right image, but I like the effect that it's doing. Okay, so I'm actually going to go and look for another image. I'm going to turn this one down to 0 for the moment. Okay, so I'm not removing it, but I'm going to go and look for another one. Now I got to go find my bokehs. Okay. That's another thing that we offer on the website. We offer texture packs and a bokeh overlay. So if you want to share a link to that, please, Rob. I've got 50 different bokehs in here, I think. So let me just scroll through some of these. So I'm looking for one that's yellow or has one sort of up the top. This one actually might work because I can also change the color of the bokeh inside of Luminar. That one might work. There's more at the top. Okay, I'm just sort of scrolling through them. Ooh, that one's kind of cool. Let me keep that one in mind. Number 7. It's got kind of that streak of light. That one too. I'm actually going to try 7. Okay, so let's go for that one. And now I have to add it. Okay, so I just added it to my list. I'm going to flip it upside down because I like this idea of this sort of sun flare at the top here. Okay, and again, notice it added it at normal. Let's go down to that overlay. Okay, or soft light. I like the overlay. Look what that's doing. Oh, that is cool. Okay, now we can increase the opacity or make it softer. Can't decide if I like the glare over there or over here. I kind of like it over here. I could lower the opacity and make it a bit more gentle. I can also adjust various different things. Okay, so now this is a layer that I can adjust the contrast. Okay, so I can lower the contrast of it if I don't want it so contrasty. I can also lower the saturation. Okay, so if I don't like the color of the bokeh, look at that. I can just lower it because it's too pink. Okay, or I can shift the colors in different ways, okay? So I can lower the saturation, or I can make it completely black and white using the black and white tool. Okay, so now I just have nice clean white bokeh. And then I can go into toning and add yellow to the highlights this way. These are all things that I'm teaching in the Luminar Neo class. Okay, so see how I'm adding yellow now because it wasn't the color that I wanted. Okay, so I can make it orange like so, and I'm just adding it in the highlights. See that? Maybe I'll add some of the shadows as well. Grab the same color. See what that's doing? So it's playing on the yellow from the sky that we've already got, right? But I can still go up and adjust all of the things. I can adjust the layer properties, make it darker, okay, and so on. Let's see what happens if we turn that up. So this one works really well in this image in terms of that. So we can make really different looks, right? I can have this really bright, sunny image, or I can make something that's completely moody, right? Which is actually, I think, kind of cool, right? So keep in mind, if we like this one better than this one, I can go back to this layer, just right click it and just remove it, okay? We weren't seeing it anyways. Well, let's see what else. I really like what's happening here. I think I want to darken the sky a little bit. So I'm actually just going to do minus exposure. Might take a second here. No, it's not working. It's on the whole image. Okay, so let's go back to the base image. And I'm going to do minus exposure and minus highlights. Okay, see what that's doing on the sky. I'm just looking at the sky. And then I'm going to paint it in. Okay, so paint, large brush, square bracket keys. And I'm just going to do sort of one pass over the sky here. Like so. And I think I'm going to take the saturation down just a tiny bit, which also affects the sky. Okay. So let's see what we've done to this image in Luminar. Played on the flare that's already there and added some additional bokeh to make a really cool image. Okay. We could further mask it, right, on the layer, right? If I don't want all the bokeh to show up, maybe I don't want these big ones as much. Okay, so I can just sort of mask these ones or lower their intensity a little bit. Right. So I'm keeping these, maybe this one I don't want over here. So you have total control of how and where these appear based on all of these criteria that I've mentioned. Okay. What do you guys think? Okay, so I'm going to apply that and take it back to, oops, I think I got to go over here. There we go. Coming back to Lightroom. All right, let's see. Thanks for asking about the Photoshop 301, Stephanie. Yes, that's coming up in April 14th, and you can register for that. Rob should have a link in the chat for registering for that. Awesome. Thanks, Sheila. Have you started going through the lessons yet? I have a sort of a secret guest appearance at some point. Let me know when you get to that one. Possibly, but the playing the devil's advocate makes it look like the lens or sensor needs cleaning. Possibly, but most likely it's just because the sun is hitting the lens, and you will always get that kind of flare when you have the sun or the light hitting the lens directly. And sometimes, like in this case, I say just go with it. Sometimes I'll create lens flare on purpose, and I'm going to make Rob go find the one on creating a sun flare. Adjusting the black and white bokeh complements the scene. Yeah, exactly. So even if the bokeh is the wrong color, you can make it work, right? So I looked for one that had better placement of the bokeh, and it really matched this image to create sort of that feeling that it's flaring towards the foreground. You're welcome, Vic. I'm going to do yours next. So if you want to just hang on, and I hope that Bjorn enjoys this edit of his image. What do you think? Looking better the more you look at it. Awesome. Doesn't it feel dreamy, right? Here, let me put the image full screen, and let's just go. Oops, wrong thing here. Let me just go like that. Okay, how is it doing for you now? Now you can see the whole image. Think about it. How does it make you feel? That's a good question. How does this image make you feel? Okay, versus the original. So there's the original uncropped. We flipped it, cropped it, darkened the sky, and now we got this. Okay, very, very different. I could go a completely different way and do another edit, okay, that is actually cooler, right? I'm glad you like my edit, Bjorn. Thanks so much. So just for fun, we could actually do a totally different edit. Let me go back over here. Okay, so this is the one that came out of Lightroom. Let's take a look at the three side by side here. Okay, so I want to go the original, cropped and Lightroom edited, and Luminar edited. Okay. Let's go back to the original. I still like it flopped. Okay, this is called flopping the image. And I still like it cropped, but I think maybe this time I'll keep the aspect ratio. Let's do, I really want to get rid of that space over there. And we could also push it this way and put the grasses off center. Yeah, I don't like this guy. It's a pano image to me. It really is. It's a long, narrow pano. Let's try something like that. Okay, so whatever's going on in the background here, I think we're going to go with portrait in this case. We're going to lower the contrast. And I want to see what this is. Looks like a old fence post or something. So I'm going to use the healing tool. You can get rid of things in Lightroom this way. It's going to select the source. Okay, you can move that around. So I'm going to do the top part first and then the bottom part. Okay, now see, this is critical because there's a line. So you want to make sure it lines up so that the line goes straight. And then in the middle part here, I'm going to do the same. Okay, so I need to make sure, see if I move it, the line doesn't match. Like so. Okay, so 3 clicks and it did a pretty good job of getting rid of that. So try not to do those things in one pass. Okay. All right, so let's do a little bit of dehaze. That works good. We did a little bit of exposure. We're going to go with something light and bright on this one, so completely different. Right? And I'm going to add a bunch of texture. So see what that does to the snow. Look at the texture. If I zoom in, okay, texture really brings out the sparkliness of the snow. Okay. And of course, I could mask it there, okay, using a painted or graduated filter. Actually, let's do that. Okay, so let's do a graduated or linear gradient mask. Okay, and I'm just going to drag it up from the bottom. I don't want to go too far because the depth of field is going to fall off that direction. So now I'm just applying the texture in the foreground and to the grass, so not to the background. Okay. Let's do another one while we're here. I'm going to do another mask, another linear gradient. So instead of selecting the sky, I'm just going to do a linear gradient because I want to take it farther than the sky and just bring the exposure down. Maybe highlights. Oops, highlights as well. Okay. So now let's go a different direction with this one and let's make it more blue. Okay, so if we go this way, okay, Often blue and magenta sort of go together, even though you're going opposite directions on these things. So if you find an image looks like this, it's usually a combination of both blue and magenta. Okay. Let's try daylight. Okay, that's still pretty warm, so I'm gonna lower the temperature. See how it's starting to look blue? That's actually not too bad. So when the scene is more blue, right, it's less of that sunset feel, but now it feels colder, right? You could even take this image farther, and I would have actually recommended um, shooting it closer if you had the option, right? So your lens here, you're at the maximum of this lens, and I know you don't want to walk closer because you don't want to get on the snow, right? You want to leave it pristine without footprints. But if you have a longer lens, I might have suggested doing a second or third shot where you actually just come a lot closer and shoot something like this. Okay, so you're not getting the sky in your shot, oops, at all. Okay, so this again is now very different. Okay. Still like pano for this one. No matter what I do, I still like this one pano. Okay, so that's a very different shot. Okay, now I'm going to do my shift, double click, get some whites. Look at that. Okay. So let's look at the afters. Okay, two very different interpretations of the same image, right? So I like to do this kind of thing because it's not my image and I don't have a preconceived vision of where I want to go with it, right? So I want to give you possibilities, right? Sheila says this would make a wonderful print on canvas. Well, you can talk to Bjorn about that, right? So Bjorn, your homework is to try and match one of these edits. If you like the one on the right, then you're going to need to use something that has layers. So if you don't have Luminar, you can certainly do that in Photoshop as well, right? Of course. Makes you feel warm and fuzzy in a frozen environment. Well, that's interesting. Like you have a big fuzzy sweater on, right? Here, let me come back on the screen. Makes you feel like you have a lot to learn. Well, you know what? Me too. I'm always learning new things. So don't feel bad about that. Because I think my personal thing is when you stop learning, you might as well just quit, right? What's the best way to view these Saturday tutorials? Edward, if you could just provide the link for the live, it's youtube.com/digital photo mentor/live. So if you go to that page, Rob's going to share a link for you, Edward. If you go to that page, that's our YouTube channel. Please remember to subscribe to the channel because then you'll get notices of new videos. And if you hit the notifications bell on that page, it will let you know when I'm going live, and you can come and join in on YouTube, right? So if you want to try it right now, Ed, you can actually go to the page on YouTube and we'll see your comments there, and you'll come in instead of with a little Facebook icon, you'll be chatting on YouTube. So it works the same. Yep, on YouTube. What do three lines in the gradient tell you? Do they affect the gradient? Yes. Okay. Good question. All right. Let me go back to the one that I applied the gradient on. Okay. So this is the one I did on the foreground. So what these three lines tell you, I'm just going to drag this to the bottom. Okay. So what these three lines tell you is the outer lines is the fade area. Okay. So the larger the gap between them, okay, the more the area, the more it fades from one to the other. See how gradual it is? Okay, if I turn that off, versus if I make them close together, okay. Now do you see it's a sharper line? Okay, I can make them like right on top of each other almost, and now you get almost a line. Okay, so it's just the fade area is what now I gotta now I gotta undo this. Okay, let's undo. There we go. Okay, so it's simply just the fade area. Okay, same thing here. Okay, I hope that answers your question. Yes, Rob has shared a link to another video I did on YouTube on just the graduated filter. It's using the older style mask and filters, but it's the same concept, right? Oh, now you like the second edit, the one that's on the screen, Stephanie or Sheila? Bjorn likes them both. Awesome. And the idea is, like I said, to give you ideas, right? Get your creativity flowing. Holly says she started learning 18 months ago. Feel great about it. Started with my editing challenges. Recommended if you haven't done it. Thanks, Holly. Yeah, Rob can share a link to that as well if you want to give that a go, AJ. All right, let's see what other images we've got here. There's another one of Bjorn's that has snow, and I think I'm going to save this one because I would love to edit this one. So come back next week, Bjorn, and I'll do this one because there's really cool, lots of texture in here. And I want to make this one really blue, but we've also got some fun sun flares. Okay, so see again, this is also the light hitting the lens. Okay, so if you want to get rid of those things, if you don't want those things happening, make sure that you use a lens hood on your lens. Let me just see if I can show you mine here. Okay, so I've got my Fuji camera here. Okay, that's the lens. Where are we? That's the lens hood. Okay, it's got these notches in it because the lens is wide. But what this will do is try to minimize the light hitting the lens. So if you have a lens hood, definitely use it. Okay. I can't tell you how many times I've actually had my lens hood smack into things, so it saves my lens as well. Well, actually, Holly, she's saying that we need large capacity drives, so many versions. See, that's actually one of the benefits of Lightroom is I haven't copied anything. This is just called what's a virtual copy. So all it's done is make additional thumbnail of the image so that I can try editing it a different way. Okay. If you wanted to do the same thing in Luminar, you'd actually have to duplicate your raw file and do another edit. So then you would be. Yeah. Hey, Edward, there you are. See, now your profile shows a YouTube icon. Good job. So now you know where to find us. Stephanie, I get caught up sometimes on the many edits of the same photo, and then you sort of can't decide, right? So, you know what? If you're on Facebook or on some other social media sharing site, make 3 or 4 edits of the same image and just for fun, post them all and ask your friends which one they like the best. You know, it's good for engagement as well. And it's fun. A black and white and a color. Sheila says, I thought I knew stuff, but I'm finding I was doing destructive edits and not saving correctly. Old habits die hard. I remember that discussion we had in the Photoshop class. So I'm glad you're on the right track now. All right. Ah, Canuck Dawn is here. Excellent. I have one of your images as well. All right. Thanks, Linda. I try and approach them from different angles, right? So because I'm not biased, I didn't take the image, right? So I don't have a preconceived notion as to how I think it should look. All right, Dawn is here. Now I've got one of Dawn's images. We've done Vic's. We did Bjorn's. I've also got one of Holly's. Excuse me. Oh, here comes the cough tickle. All right, so this is a beautiful image of Dawn's. So let's take a look at this one. Okay. Remind me, Dawn, I'm going to look here. You are using Lightroom Classic and Luminar AI. Okay, perfect. So I love images like this, and I love putting them through Luminar because I can really put some sort of style into them, right? And that's why I use Luminar as a plugin because it's easier to do those kind of style things than it is with Photoshop. Okay. So I'm going to start with camera profile. Okay. And I can tell he's using Fuji because of the profiles. Okay, so Astia and Provia. So I could choose Vivid, which gives you much punchier color out of the gate. But because I'm going to add some blacks and whites, I know it's going to get punchier. So I'm going to start with Astia. That's kind of my go-to. And that's the one that I usually have my camera set to as well. Okay. I'm going to do Shift double click. Okay, so I'm holding down the Shift key and I'm double clicking on the word whites. And what that does is it pops it over so that it's touching the right side of the graph without clipping. And then I'm going to do the same again, Shift, double click on blacks. Okay, so look at the difference this has made. Just changing the camera profile and those 2 clicks. Right, instant contrast. And when you add black like this, your colors intensify naturally. So that's why I didn't choose Vivid, because it's going to end up being over the top then. Okay. I might actually even add a bit more black. Okay. You want to have blacks clipping, and I'm holding down the Alt Option key while I do this. You don't want to clip the whites. Okay. You want to have detail. So clipping, if you're not familiar with that term, means that there's no detail in that area. Exposure, remember, affects the highlight, the midtones. Okay, so I could grab the exposure slider here and do this, or I can grab the histogram, click, and drag, and it does the same thing. So see how it's not affecting the highlights per se. Okay, it's shifting everything. Look at the histogram; it's sort of rocking back and forth. So I'm going to push it up a little bit, and then I'm going to bring the highlights down because I want to keep those highlights in the flowers. And I also want to warm it up because I feel like it's a little blue in the white areas especially. Okay, so I can play with one of the white balance presets. Now keep in mind, because this is a raw file, you've got all the same presets that you had in the camera. So I'm going to choose daylight. You can see that immediately looks better. And I usually dial the magenta down to about +5 because I find it's usually a little pink. But let's try cloudy and shade. Okay, so cloudy is even warmer. Okay, the temperature is higher. And shade is even warmer yet. So I'm going to settle probably somewhere in the cloudy range. Again, turning the magenta down. But look at how much yellower and greener the flowers are just by shifting the color. Okay, so we've already made a big difference. Next thing I'm going to do is apply an edge vignette, okay, because I want to draw your eye into those flowers. And I'm going to do it manually. I'm going to do a little bit of clarity, but I'm not doing much because I want it to apply just to the flowers, not to the background. Okay, anything you do here is what's called a global edit. Okay, anything you do with the masking is a local edit, and you can target your adjustments a little better into just certain areas. What was I doing? Oh, yes. Okay, so go down to Effects, and we're going to add a vignette. Okay, Lightroom Vignette has a disadvantage as opposed to Luminar Vignette because Luminar, you can actually move it around, okay, and put your vignette off center. Lightroom's has to be centered, okay? So no matter what I do, I can change the size or the midpoint. I can change the shape, okay? So more square versus more round, but I can't move it off center, okay? So see how that's just clipping the edge of that flower? So I have a choice. So I can just make it a little bigger and make sure that I keep all the flowers in, okay? And let this one go a little bit dark. So I turn the feather down to 0 and the amount down so I can see where it's going. Then once I get it where I want it, I turn the feather back up and adjust the amount so it's more subtle. Okay, and that actually works pretty well. The other thing you can do with the Luminar vignette is actually brighten the inside as well. So you kind of get a twofer as opposed to doing it here. Okay. If I want to do it off center, I would just have to do a radial filter. So let's do it. Oops, let's do it that way. So I'm just going to reset that. Actually, I'm just going to turn it off. See this little toggle here? I can just turn it off. So I'm going to use a radial gradient. Move this guy out of the road. And I'm going to make an oval. Right? One benefit Lightroom does have, if I'm doing it this way, I can move it around, right? But I can also tilt it. Okay? So that's something that I can't do in Luminar yet, anyways, that I know of. Okay? So now I'm going to put this here. But of course, I want to work on the outside of the image, right? So I just need to invert. Again, the two lines is the fade amount, okay? So you can see that it's either fading a little bit, so it's a sharper edge versus softer. You always want a softer edge, right? Because you don't want it to show where it's working, okay? So I'm just gonna bring the exposure down, okay? Because this is what you don't wanna do. Here, I'll show you what it looks like. Okay, so you don't wanna do that. See how you can see the edge, okay? So you want to make sure your inner circle is a lot different than your outer circle. See how that's working? Maybe a little too much. The other advantage of doing it this way is that I can actually blur at the same time. So I could lower the clarity, lower the sharpness, and even lower the texture. So I'll often lower all three. Now look what the outer vignette is doing. Now it's maybe a little too dark, okay? See what that's doing? So it's darkening and blurring at the same time. So there's pros and cons of the vignette versus doing a radial filter, okay? So I'm just going to undo this one because I think we did a better job with the radial filter. So let's do before and after. Okay, so all of that so far has literally just been about sort of basic corrections, lighting adjustments, and so on. Okay, I'm happy with how that looks, but I want to add some funk. So let's take it to Luminar. Okay, so I'm going to right click. Now I'm using Luminar Neo. Okay, and if you are using Luminar AI, I would highly recommend that you upgrade. Please provide a link to our Luminar upgrade so they can use our link. Using our link just means that we get a small credit for sending you as a referral fee. I am a Skylum ambassador. You still pay the same price for it, but you're helping support us and helping me to continue doing these free tutorials every week. All right. Did you find the Sunflare article, Rob? There's one called Sunflares. I can find it if you haven't found it. Okay, so now we are over in Luminar Neo. Luminar Neo does have some presets, but they're at a bit of a disadvantage right now because if you apply one, it erases everything else you've done and you can't really edit it, okay? The only thing you can do is dial it up or down. So I'm not a super fan of how the presets work currently. So I'm just going to go in and do a few edits, okay? I'm going to head straight to my favorite, Mystical. And I'm actually going to compare the two. I did a full video on this inside the Luminar Neo course. I think it was 30 minutes actually on just these two tools because I tend to use Mystical a lot on this kind of image for landscapes and things, and I tend to use the glow tools a bit more for portraits. Okay, so that's kind of cool. Look at what it's doing. It gives it that really soft feeling that flowers should have, right? So I'm going to leave that up a little bit. And if I don't want the flowers glowing as much, of course, I can mask it. So I just want this one a tiny bit sharper. So where I'm painting is actually erasing. Okay. And I'm letting these further runs go out into blur. So now see what it's doing? Let me see what the glow does. Okay, there's one under here called glow that actually makes the whites glow. So see how that's affecting the flowers more than the background? In this case, that's the opposite of what I would want. Orton effect is decent, but again, it makes the whites fairly glow. Okay. Overall softness. So I still think the best one was the Mystical. Okay. Like so. The only other thing that I might consider with this one is we can look at the landscape tool, okay? Because there's the foliage enhancer and the golden hour. Okay? Foliage enhancer, for me, always makes the green sort of neon, and I usually adjust the hue this direction. So see how I'm adjusting the hue to the left, and the green looks more realistic now. And then I'm going to dial it back. Okay, so dial it up, get the color, dial it back. Golden glow or golden hour literally just does what it says, gives it a golden glow. It tends to brighten things a little bit as well. So after I apply this, I usually go back and bring it highlights down a little bit more. Okay, so just enhancing that sort of nice yellow tone. And the other one that I might consider doing on here is one of two things. I might add a texture overlay, or I might add a mood, or if we're really getting crazy, we could do both. Okay, so mood, if you are using an older version of Lightroom, may be called LUTs. And this is like a cinematic sort of color grading. Okay. The unfortunate thing is there isn't a preview currently with Luminar Neo, so you have to click on each one, but it works pretty fast to apply it. I recommend increasing the amount to 50 or so. Then you can really see the effect and then decide which one you like, and then you can always scale it back. Right? That's kind of cool. So I'm literally just shopping for a LUT. So some of them provide like a faded out or a matte look. I'm looking at the cross-processed ones. Yeah, they're going a little over the top. And even look at the portrait ones. So even though they say they're for portrait, that doesn't mean you have to use them on a portrait, right? I think I like the one that was at the top. Was it this one? No. Who remembers which one it was? Was it this one? So that darkens the edges again. Well, that's kind of cool. It's like a matte look. Can you see that? So the blacks are not pure black now. See what it's doing? And it's almost giving a blue tint to the shadows. So I like that. Let's just dial it down a little bit. Give it a little bit more contrast. I like that. Okay, and then let's do a texture. Let's see. I've got a couple of textures in here installed already. So I'm just going to pick one that I've got installed just for speed. Okay, so once again, it puts it in at opacity 50, and I need to change the blend mode. Usually for textures, I find that overlay or soft light work pretty well. Right? So see how you're getting a lot of the texture showing up in this background. Let me increase it. We can flip it around. Okay, there's a big sort of spot that looks better up there. Okay. Let's try. That's too much. Let's see what happens if we do darken. So darken is the opposite of what I want. Okay, now it's on the flowers, not on the background. Okay, so lighten might work better. Nope, too light. Still soft light. Okay, so I'm going to use soft light. Crank it up a little bit. Now remember, we've got all of the tools at our disposal. Okay, I can increase the contrast, and this is only going to affect the texture. Okay, because I'm on the texture layer. Sorry, coughing. Anything I do here, I'm gonna have a sip of my coffee. Okay, anything I do here is only affecting the texture layer. Okay, so contrast. Okay, if I don't like the color in it, remember we can turn down the saturation. Okay, so now we have just the texture versus it's kind of pink on the texture, so I want less color. Pushing up the contrast works well, right? And we could also do structure, okay? So that's actually going to add even more texture. Okay, so see how we can go crazy with that and then go back to the properties and dial it back a little bit. Somewhere in there, right? And of course, we can always mask it. So if there's an area you don't want it to apply, you can just mask it. Where the edits go now, okay, if you've done one tool and applied it, like I did with structure here, okay, if you go back to that tool again, you'll notice that it's at 0. Okay, so it's not that your edits are gone, they're just over here now in this new history. So I'm going to dial the structure down a little bit because it's gone a little too much over the top. Okay, before and after. Okay, I think that's pretty cool. Okay, I could also add a vignette. Okay, now remember, if I add a vignette here, I'm adding it on the texture. Okay, so it's going to apply to the whole image, but it's going to affect the edges of the texture. Okay. Let's see where that's going. Okay. So now we have more texture on the edges. I'm pretty happy with that. Let's export. Okay, so clicking apply brings it back to Lightroom. All right, how are we doing? We're coming up to just over an hour, and I need to keep it on schedule today because I've got to make more Luminar Neo videos, but I want to see how we're doing for questions before we wrap up. Okay, let's see. What did I miss? Let's see. Okay. Flower is a frangipani, common here in New Zealand or in Oz. I think I've seen them in New Zealand as well. Would that be the case, Don? What do you think of that edit? So the texture is a sort of an added idea at the end, but I kind of like it. Okay. Yeah, if you are upgrading from Luminar AI to Neo, when you get to the order page, there's a thing at the top that says, here, I'll see if I can share it on the screen. There's a thing at the top that would say, get your pricing. So if you click on buy now, and let's just put this over here, right? There should be a thing for, yes, right here. So it says, see if you already own a Luminar or a Skyline product, validate your special price. Okay, now my prices are shown in Canadian because that's where I am. So it will show in your currency. But if you already own something and you have a Skyline account, just click on that and you'll see a lower price. Okay. If you don't already have Aurora, this is a great opportunity to grab Aurora literally for 14 bucks. Okay. So if you don't already have Luminar Neo, I recommend getting that and adding the Aurora. If you're not sure what Luminar X is a membership thing to get extra assets. So you get sky pack or a texture pack or a preset pack or something like that from Luminar, from Skyline, I think 8 times a year, something like that, or monthly. Okay. Plus, there's also free tutorials that they provide for people that are Luminar X memberships. Okay. But it's not mandatory and it has nothing to do with the software. Okay. Yes, this is the one I was talking about for the sun flares. So here's the fun part about when I do videos and when we're doing lives and things like this, Rob is usually not paying attention to what I'm teaching because he's checking the chat and doing all these things. Then when he goes through and edits the videos later, he'll come to me and say, hey, I learned this thing in the video while I was editing. And he's actually decided that Luminar, our Lightroom Bridge is, Adobe Bridge is going to work for him. So awesome. yes, 10 and 11 will be the end of today. I've already passed them off to Rob, so now he's doing his thing. So the way that the Luminar Neo course is working, Edward, is that I am pre-recording the lessons, but we're also going to do live. So in the lives, we're actually going to watch some of the lessons together, and then each one will have a Q&A session afterwards. Okay, so we'll watch lesson 1, for example, and then any questions about the content in that. If I need to demonstrate anything additional, that will be done in the Zoom. And if you can't make it to the live class, that also will be recorded and added to the lessons. Okay, so you can always watch it later. And if you can't attend a live Zoom, you can always send me your questions ahead of time, and I'll make sure to answer them in the live. Okay, so they will be a huge benefit. I'm curious to see how you would edit it, Don. Feel free, share the link to our Facebook group, Rob. If you are on Facebook, Don, do come and join our group and share your images in the group, because I'd love to see, comparisons of how you would edit this image. What was your interpretation of it, right? 1 o'clock Edmonton time, Ed. So where are you located? And I can probably convert it for you. Oh, he's California? All right. Well, there's a great time zone converter. I know this is confusing for a lot of people. So what I recommend is I'm going to put in my time zone here, and I'm going to plug in the next live for you. And then you can just plug in your time zone. Okay, so here's a link. I'm going to put it in the chat for you. Okay, so if you're not sure what time it is, just use that time converter, add your city, okay, and it will tell you the date and the time that the next one will be, right? So yes, noon for California, Ed. So I think we're going to stop there. I'm just going to go back over here to remind you that the Neo course is available. Let me go full screen on that one. Okay, so Luminar course is available. Rob has provided the link. He can probably provide that again. If you're watching this as a replay, there's links below the video in the video description for all of the things that we talked about today, as well as for submitting your images if you'd like to submit your images. So I didn't get to either of yours today, Holly, but I've got tons of yours for next week. And I'm going to do Bjorn's other snow image as well. So tune in next week, same time, same place, and I'll see you there.